So lost and afraid when I'm in the dark and can't seem to find my way. When I'm feeling lonely in the dead of the night, I remember the promise. You will be my light. My light. You will be my light. My light. You will be my light when the sun don't shine. Telling me everything's gonna be alright. You will be my light, yeah. I've tried on my own strength, but I just trip and fall. Put my faith in the wrong things. Turns out after all, you're the answer for every problem. You're the grace when I hit the bottom. The lamp unto my feet. Oh Lord, let it shine. You will be my light. My light. You will be my light. My light. You will be my light when the sun don't shine. Telling me everything's gonna be alright. You will be my light, yeah. You're the way when my feet can't find it. You're the truth when my head is lying. You're the life when my heart is dying. You will be my light, yeah. You're the way when my feet can't find it. You're the truth when my head is lying. You're the life when my heart is dying.
When did you come up with that Hello Friends?
2002 PGA Championship at Hazeltine. I said it on Saturday's third round. My father was deep in the throes of his battle that he would lose in 08 to Alzheimer's. And he had faint recognition of his son. And I told him the last thing I had said earlier in the week when I went to see him in Houston was, I'm going to say a little cryptic message to you on the air this weekend, and it's hello, friends. Because my dad had nothing but friends in his life. And I said it that Saturday when we came on the air. Now, Eli Spielman, a great friend of mine who co-authored a book that I wrote, it's been now 10 years, Always by My Side, a book about my father. He heard that on the air that day, and after the show, he called and said, I heard you say hello, friends. Where'd you come up with that? I told him it was about my dad. He said, you know what? That sounds like you. You ought to go up with that tomorrow. I mean, I think this is something you should do all the time. So I did it Sunday, and I have done it every show since. And I love it because for that little moment, I connect with my dad, and I feel like I'm talking to him. You know, there's a whole invisible audience out there that's tens of thousands and millions strong. And Jim McKay one time told me, when you look into that lens, think of one person. And he told me that when I was just out of college, long before I worked at CBS. And I never could quite relate to that. But when Hello Friends came along, it clicked, and it became something now that it's a calming effect. Every time I come on the air, I say hello, friends, because my dad had nothing but friends. And I think of my dad, and I channel him, and off and running we go.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Woodmont Christian Church. This is the first of a series of talks we have. I hope the crowd holds every week like this. That'll be great. Clay Stauffer, I'm the pastor here, and it is an honor and a privilege to introduce who I think is the greatest sportscaster of all time, called Super Bowls, called the Masters, Final Fours. Let's welcome Jim Nantz to Woodmont tonight.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you. And may I say, hello, friends. And hello, fellow parishioners. I'm a proud member of this church. Now, you don't see me on Sunday very often because I have to work on Sundays. But I'm out there because we have this little thing called streaming. And I've told this to Clay many times. I love Clay. Clay is an amazing part of my life. That when I'm sitting in my hotel room in some foreign city, Scotland this year, this Sunday it'll be in Kansas City, I go to the link I watch the service, I want to hear his homily, and I go to work. So I'm there from afar, and it's a big part of my life. And I'm grateful to be here in the bridge, as I know it, with all of you tonight. So Clay, thank you, pal.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to those that are joining on the live stream tonight. Great to have you with us as well. So that was the origin of the phrase, hello, friends, and it was directed at your father when he was battling Alzheimer's. Can you tell us a little bit about your dad and what influence he had on you? What were the values, the things that he taught you?
Well, the influence never stops, and that also speaks to my mom, too. I was just so fortunate to have loving parents who nurtured me, loved me, made me believe that these crazy goals that I had were attainable. See, I knew since I was a little boy I wanted to work for CBS. This is exactly what I wanted to do, right down to the network. Since I would say about 11 years old, this was exactly the place I wanted to be. Now, the odds are astronomical to have this kind of goal that kind of transitioned into almost an obsession. And 3.5 years out of college, I got hired by CBS. This week, Saturday, will be the anniversary of my first show on CBS, September 14th, 1985. And this begins my 40th year at the home of my childhood dream. But my parents were just beautiful people. We were from Charlotte, North Carolina. My mom was formerly Miss Charlotte, beautiful lady. We lost her not quite 2 years ago, in October of 22. And Clay presided over her service in North Carolina. I had him come in. And, I'm not over it. I'm not sure I ever will be. And that's true for my dad, too, who's been gone now for 16 years. But they poured their lives into their children. And I have a sister, older sister, Nancy, and we are proud products of a loving, nurturing home where the parents put their children first. And I'm so proud to be able to kind of have that little connection point on the air with my dad. Believe me, my mom is front of mind as well. But I just have done it repetitively so many times that I could be walking through Green Hills Mall. Somebody will walk over and say, hello, friends. It's everywhere. So a couple of years ago,
did you trademark
I thought I need to trademark this. Mm-hmm. So I did. And it's its own story. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but there was merchandise being posted online, T-shirts and all kinds of things. And some of the packaging of it didn't look all that nice to me. And I thought, just kind of want to have a little control over it. So spent about $25,000 in legal fees to get the trademark. And this lawyer from New York, who was a great friend, he called back and said, I think we've got it, but I got to tell you what it's going to cost. We found the person who actually owns it. We're going to buy it from him if you want me to proceed, but I've negotiated a fee. I said, okay, go ahead. And he says, it's going to cost you $664. I said, $1,000? He goes, no, dollars. I spent $25,000 to buy something for $664. You got to explain that one to me. But I'm the proud owner of it. I think I heard you say it a minute ago, hello friends, so you owe me $2. Okay. Put an extra $2 in the plate for me this Sunday.
All the lawyers in here understand how that gap was filled, right? So pretty good. Well, so tell everybody, first of all, I'd love for you to tell them the story about you and your college roommate, Freddie Couples, from when you were in Houston, and then tell how you got into broadcasting in the early years. It's really interesting how that unfolded.
I masqueraded as a golfer, and if anybody saw me play today, they would say, you could not have possibly played college golf, because I'm walking around, struggling to break 90. I do work, and I don't practice a lot. I play very little. I channel my love of the game through my son, who is at Lower Innsworth, and he's got some games. So I feel like my golf ability was always, now I'm starting to convince myself that my love of the game and my playing of the game was all to one day be able to teach my son. He's really good. He's only 8 years old, so I don't want to get carried away here, but he's really talented, and I've been around enough good players to know when someone has, the foundation to be really good, and he has a chance to be really outstanding. But the first day I showed up at school at the University of Houston, I was one of 7 freshmen on the team, and the coach was a legend, Dave Williams. He won 16 national championships, and there he was gathering his 7 freshmen together, and he said, "Boys, you've all come in from all over the country. I want you to stand up and introduce yourselves one at a time. All we need to hear right now, your name, where you're from, and what your goal is in life." He was a very goal-minded mentor and teacher. So he said, "Jimmy, you're first." So I stood up. I wasn't bashful about speaking in front of crowds. And of course, this was 7 people, but I said, "Jim Nantz from Charlotte, went to high school in New Jersey, and I want to one day work for CBS because I want to broadcast the Masters tournament." The 4th guy steps up very bashfully and he says, "I'm Fred Couples and I'm from Seattle, Washington, and one day I want to win the Masters." So coach said, "Okay, we're going to put you 2 guys in the same room over here." So we found that room assignment. It was 4 of us actually in a little 2-bedroom suite, and best of friends all through school and brotherhood to this day with my roommates. And we used to practice the power of prayer, the power of believing. And, you have to put yourself in the time and place. The space then was not cheapened by social media and hot takes. The world had more belief in one another. It was more positive vibes in the air. And we were good kids. I mean, there was no hijinks going on with us. We were really goal-minded kids. These were great players, myself excluded. But we would sit in the room. I'm not saying we did this on a daily basis, maybe once a semester, a handful of times maybe. I would sit across from Fred, and we would rehearse the green jacket ceremony from Butler Cabin. I welcome everybody back. We have our Masters champion here, Fred Couple. I would sell Freddie on the fact, this could be good for you one day, because you're going to be there, and I'm going to be there too. So we might as well get a handle on it now. So we practiced it.
Wow.
Just 2 kids dreaming and believing. It's a beautiful story, I think, because there was love there, and there was respect, and there was encouragement, and you're definitely emitting these positive vibes. We're in each other's space and sphere, and we're feeling what they need and what I need to make that all believable. You fast forward to 1992, April 12th, 1992, Fred won the Masters. I was sitting at Butler Cabin, and I was there to interview him and give him the green jacket. And it started in a dorm room, that very scene. So it's amazing, amazingly blessed to have had experiences like that.
So from college on, how did your broadcasting career begin?
It began when I was in college.
Okay.
It began when I was in college. The coach knew my goal, again, obsession, was to work in sports television. And I had been writing the broadcasters of my youth since I was 11 years old, writing notes, fan mail. One of them I heard back from, Jim McKay. Wide World of Sports, spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport. And by the way, that doesn't mean the other gentlemen weren't great guys, because I got to know them all. Whitaker, Summerall, Inberg, Gowdy, Schenkel, Keith Jackson. They were giants. I know there are many names. I could keep going on. I used to write them. Well, I got a letter back from Jim McKay. I was 11 years old. So what do? You immediately sit down and write him another note, hurriedly, get it back in the mail. Then I realized, maybe I need to slow this pace down a little bit. I ran that back to about once a year, but I'd hear from him. And I found out later on, he was aware there was this kid that had been writing him for a long time. And once I got to college, I was giving him updates on what I was doing. He knew I was a golfer. And I started working in the industry, thanks to our golf coach, when I was a sophomore. Actually, I had my own sports call-in show on the CBS radio affiliate in Houston. It was a big 50,000-watt radio station. It was a lot of responsibility for a 19-year-old. My roommates are half the time the ones calling in, disguising their voices. Yeah, what about the Astros this year? Are they going to make a run? Yeah, whatever. I had a co-host. I was the anchor. That somehow segued to where I became, through a whole, again, strangely guided from above, these opportunities. I auditioned to be the weekend sports anchor on the CBS affiliate in Houston when I was 20 and living in the dorm, and I won. So I was still a student, still had a year and a half to go, and I was still living in the dorms. And on Saturday and Sunday night, I'm on the 6 and 10 o'clock news doing the sports, acting like a big shot. And then, of course, Monday morning, I'm back in the dormitory cafeteria going through the line with my tray. And the kids were like, there was no ESPN back in those. There was no cable TV. So your source was limited to CBS, NBC, ABC. And it'd be like, man, I saw you on TV last night. I mean, I felt like such a big deal on campus, but I was just a kid. And so all these opportunities happened. The day I graduated, I think it might have been the day after, I got a letter back from Jim McKay saying, I know you're graduating. I want to wish you well. I would love to meet you. As time will meet, can you come up to Connecticut sometime and play golf? I'd love to play around and golf with you. So I did. Within a few weeks, I flew to LaGuardia, took one of those shuttle buses that went up the Merritt Parkway, got dropped off at one of the exits, and thumbed a ride to the Connecticut Golf Club, where he told me to meet. I'd already called ahead to the pro, and I slept overnight because we're going to play the next morning on the locker room floor, which is pretty good if you get that opportunity. It's a little stiff, but you got the shower there, you got the run of the place.
Everything you need.
It was everything you need is right there. They got the hairbrushes, you can shave, they got everything you need. So the next day I played golf with Jim McKay.
Wow.
And that was a milestone moment for me because I got to see him in person. He was a real person. He was a father. He was a family man. It just dazzled me. And he definitely kept track of my career. Mm-hmm. Upon graduation, after meeting Mr. McKay, I went to Utah, a CBS station again, KSL, and I was the anchor there on KSL, and I did the Utah Jazz games in the NBA with a legendary pro of yesteryear named Hot Rod Hundley. Hot Rod and I were the Jazz announcers. I was 23, fresh out of college, and I was doing the NBA, big opportunity. And I was also doing BYU's football games, at the same time. And Steve Young was my analyst and all that. And I thought this was a great stepping stone. I need to do games to be able to get one day recognized by the network. And sure enough, 2 years after I had gone to Salt Lake City, I got a call out of nowhere from CBS to come to New York and audition. Wow. And I won that audition. I was one of 5 that auditioned for that. And just a whole series of different little moments in the road that have to go the right way. And you have to, when the opportunity presents itself, you have to be ready for that moment. Mm-hmm. You hope opportunity and talent and ability and passion, there's hopefully this confluence that come together at the right time, and boom, the next thing you know, your life changes. Just to finish on Mr. McKay, his last show was 2000 in St. Andrews at the Open Championship. I wanted to go there for 2 reasons. One, Tiger was going to be attempting to complete the career Grand Slam. He had just won Pebble Beach in the U.S. Open by 15 shots. Everyone knew he was going to win at St. Andrews, and he'd be the youngest ever. He's still just one of 5 to ever win all 4 legs of the Grand Slam. So I wanted to be there for that. And the second reason was I wanted to be there to see Jim McKay walk into the booth for his last show. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to him and asked if I could visit with him on that Sunday. And he said it would be an honor. And of course, the honor is all mine. So I showed up at the Rusacks Hotel that's off the right side of the 18th fairway at the old course. And I called up to his room. He said, come on up. It was about an hour before he was going to leave. His room was, I was shocked. I figured he was probably in the presidential suite. Again, I had him built up to be what I thought he deserved. He was in a tiny room with a twin bed. There was a bottle of red wine on the windowsill that had been uncorked with a little glass there. Probably took a little nip at night as he was writing his opening for the next day. And we talked about the scope of his career. I mean, he really had taken all of us around the world before the world became smaller and more connected. He was at the Great Wall of China. He hosted all these Olympic Games. And I was just, couldn't believe I had the chance to visit. I was being with Pavarotti in his dressing room before his last concert. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden the phone rang and they said, we've got a driver here to take you across the 18th and the first fairway in a cart. And it's time for you to show up to work. So he said, why don't you ride over there with me? So I got on the back of a cart, like you do, you stand on the back, holding on, and he's sitting in the front seat. We cut across those two fairways. Their booth was right off the first tee. And I watched him go up the stairs, he gave me a hug, and I waited for that kind of presidential wave when they go up the Air Force One and they turn around at the last minute and look down and give him one of those waves. And I was right there, give him a wave. And off he went to go do his last broadcast of what I thought was the greatest career, still think is the greatest career of all time. And my trip was complete. I blended into the gallery and walked around, watched Tiger complete the Grand Slam, and I flew home.
Wow.
And 8 years later, 3 weeks to the day before my dad died, Mr. McKay died, and I ended up doing his eulogy.
Wow.
So I went from being a little boy who wrote him letters at 11 to one day being gifted the opportunity to stand up and speak on behalf of that man who spoke to millions of us Americans and brought the world to us.
Wow, that's powerful. All right, I want to go back to Houston because there was another person who was very influential in your life. People may not know this. President George H.W. Bush, who was also another father figure for you. He wrote the foreword to your book. I don't think he's ever written another foreword. And you guys were really close. So tell us how you got to know President Bush 41.
41 was a giant figure in my life, and I miss him so much. Just, talking about my parents, I just miss the guidance. Suddenly I'm at an age where the elder guider of your life, they're all gone now, but I was a kid from Houston who made it to the network. The Bush family is amazing. They're sports fans. This is not political at all, folks. I know we're 24 hours after a debate and everything in this country is so polarized. I'm going to tell you about a love story about a man I knew who was a friend of mine and a mentor, amazing friend and mentor who gave me so many incredible opportunities to see how you treat people the right way. So when he was president, when he was vice president, I got hired by CBS, and I started to get an occasional message through his golf pro, who was on my golf team, how proud he was that Houston has this kid who made it to the network. And that evolved to the point when he was president, which was 89 through 92, how one day he looks forward to having a chance to meet. He lost to President Clinton in the election, and President Clinton was sworn in January 20th, 1993. I had my first chance to spend time with 41 within a few weeks of that. I flew down to Houston to play golf with him. From there, it went to multiple visits every summer to their summer home in Kennebunkport, Maine, called Walker's Point. Mm-hmm. I had an agent. The agents are friends of mine, the great men and women who were on his detail. They know your every move, but I had 35 separate trips to Walker's Point where I stayed in the big house, anywhere from 1 night to 4 nights.
Wow.
I became kind of his playing companion. His boys and his daughter, they all had busy lives. My schedule's all kind of upside down. I'm free Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then I'm gone Thursday through Sunday. At the time, I was living in Connecticut, and if he needed someone to come up and experience field day with President Bush, I was his man. And
You were willing to go.
I was willing to serve my country. And it did happen, though. At about the same time, my dad was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He was totally aware of all of this, and he knew how much I longed for my father's words of advice. So from the mid-90s until he passed away in 2018, there was not a decision in my career, nor in my personal life, that did not have 41 guiding me through it. Contracts, personal things, every step of the way, regular contact, traveling with him on trips where he would make speaking engagements and I would be his hang guy, his wingman. Cruises through the Greek Isles, trips to places like Bermuda and all over where he's meeting with heads of state, and I'm the guy that tags along to be his friend, play golf, dinners. You tell these stories and people think, is that really true? It's really true. You said something which is also true. He wrote the foreword to the book, Always by My Side, my book I wrote about my dad. Presidents don't, and ex-presidents don't write, former presidents don't write forewords. It was a beautiful thing that he wrote. So a lot of things spun out of that. I was with him in some situations that blow my mind now that I look back on it. Can I share a couple?
Yeah, please.
Okay. One of them was in 2005. He and President Clinton had now suddenly become teammates in tsunami relief efforts. This tragedy happened in Southeast Asia over the holidays of 2004. It wiped 10,000 people off the map, destroyed this whole region. 43 was in office. He asked his dad and his predecessor to come together and raise money around the world. They globetrotted and raised $1.5 billion together. A friendship evolved, a true, genuine respect and friendship for one another. So as this was all going on, I'm getting regular updates from 41, who, by the way, never, ever said a coarse thing about anyone. Never would say something that could be taken the wrong way. Anything tawdry, nothing. Just the ultimate gentleman. And he was telling me, Jimmy, President Clinton is such a nice guy. I'm really enjoying being with him. It's unearthly the way he looked at people. He said, we want to get together on a social basis. And we're enjoying each other's company. And we were thinking about where could we go, vacation or a golf trip or something. Ultimately, we just decided it'd be a lot easier since the detail is here if he just came up to Walker's Point this summer. So here's my question. He prefaced it by saying, I need a favor. He would never ask anybody for a favor. How many favors do you get asked for in a week? We all do. And we're happy to serve on most occasions. Best we can, we try our best. He would never ask me for a ticket, for a game, anything. Never saw him do that for anyone. Never wanted to put anyone out. So he said, I really hate to ask. When he would say something, I'm about to ask for a favor, you knew he was about to lay the biggest favor in the world on you. We're going to get together. We need someone to be with us to keep the conversation going, so when there's awkward silence or something and we don't know what to do, we just need an intermediary. So I said, sir, what are you asking? He said, I'm asking if you would come and serve as our intermediary this summer. Oh my gosh, it's one of the nicest things of my life to have. He said, I've talked to President Clinton about it. I had met President Clinton a few times, and he said, oh, that would be great. So here's the question. You work all the time. We're just a couple of old former presidents. Our schedules are pretty much wide open. When can you do it? So I sat down, looked at the calendar. He wanted to do it in June. I gave him like June 5th and 6th or something. And that ended up working. So we had a fabulous couple of days in Kennebunkport, including picking up President Clinton so that the media would not see that they were together. This was supposed to be under wraps. And we went and picked them up by boat in a little harbor in the upper reaches of Maine, where President Clinton had been doing a book signing. And President Clinton had recently had a heart issue. It was a very stormy, choppy day on the boat, on 41. He was a Navy aviator, but man, he was a mariner too. So he knew how to get us up there, and all on instruments, cut the engines back. Here was a little harbor shrouded in fog. You couldn't see anything. He's just riding on instruments. We got 2 flanker Secret Service boats on each side, and I could hear them talking. 41s, cut the engines. We're looking for 42 is wearing an orange shirt. Look, Mr. President, I can see orange through the fog over there. It kind of goes over there. We pull up to a dock, and here are 2 presidents who ran for the highest office in the land are meeting at this pickup point in some no-name town in Maine. I mean, it is like out of a movie. And he hopped out of the boat. The 2 of them embraced, and he said, President Clinton said, "Are we going back by boat?" He said, "Yeah, we just did it." He said, "My heart can't take it." So President turned to Tommy Frechette, who was his personal aide, flipped him the keys to the boat and said, "We're going to go back by car." He said, "But Mr. President, we don't have the detail, and there's only one SUV here." We'll be fine. So we got into an SUV, 2 agents in the front, Clinton, Nantz, Bush, on the bench on the second row. Between the 3 of us, we served 3 terms as president of the United States. 2 for Clinton, 1 for Bush. Yeah, that's it, 3. We went down with no police escort. Traffic, of course, we had to battle that. But we got back to Kennebunkport, and we were out of view for the first 24 hours. But then the word kind of began to circulate the first time we went out to go get dinner. That night, Mrs. Bush turned to me and said, "You know, Jimmy," she was amazing, just amazing. Barbara turned to me and she said, she was sitting right to my left. She goes, "Jimmy, you know, it might be nice if you stood up and made a toast to these 2 men." And I wanted to say it might have been nice if you give me about a 10-minute warning, but clanked my glass and I just said, "This right here represents the best of who we are as Americans. 2 former presidents can find common ground and have a respect and love and a friendship like what I'm witnessing here. The world doesn't know. You guys are vacationing together. They no doubt will find out. But what an important message this is to the rest of the world, that we're a civilized nation. This is how we do things in America, right here." And I raised the glass. The next day, there was an AP photographer with a long lens who was pirating pictures off of Walker's Point, and I was in all of these shots. And I was starting into my phone, but it was the lead story on the evening news and all that. I even got a call from the president of CBS News saying, "Nantz, are you really there with the 2?" It was front page of the New York Times that these 2 guys were together hanging out. He said, "This is the biggest story in the country." He said, "Look, you're going live tomorrow with Weather. We're going to put you in the first segment." I said, "Wait a minute, who says I am?" He says, "You work for CBS." I said, No, this has nothing to do with CBS. They're my friends. I said, "This discussion is over. I'll see you back in New York." Click. They just assumed that I'm going to go in New York and tell everybody what's going on here on Walker's Point.
Wow.
That ended up happening the next year. There were multiple years of us getting together and hanging out. And we're on 9/11.
I want to talk to you about 9/11.
Yeah, on the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of 9/11, I was at Walker's Point with President and Mrs. Bush, and was there with Davis Love. And President always, he does things like, we play golf in less than 2 hours, but they were going to go to church in town. Not St. Anne's, which is also in town where they got married, but a little congregational church. And we're watching all the coverage in the morning and having breakfast, and then he picks up the phone, calls Gene Becker, Chief of Staff, says, "Gene, tell all the agents, everybody, come on down in the circular driveway At 8:45, he said, I want to have a moment of silence. And tell them just to leave their post and come on up here. So I think the exact time the first tower was struck was around 8:45 Eastern time, maybe 48. So we went out into the circular driveway. He never wore a fancy watch. He had a leather strapped watch. Not that this is fancy, but he handed me his watch. He said, Jimmy, when that second hand gets to the top of the hour, he said, I want you to open up this moment of silence and hand it off to me. I said, yes, sir, it'd be my pleasure. I'm looking at this thing. And everybody's got their head bowed. There's probably 25 people there in all. And I just said, it was 1 year ago at this time that our country changed forever. And Mr. President, I think it's time that we pay tribute in our own way. He said a prayer. He asked us all to bow our head, which we did. And then he said, thank you. And everybody went back to where they were going. We got into the SUVs and went to church, and then we went and played golf. That night, 43 is doing all the stops. He started in New York. He started at the Pentagon, went to Shanksville, and then he ended up on Ellis Island, on Liberty Island, beneath the Statue of Liberty. And he addressed the entire country on the 1 year anniversary. You remember what a solemn day that was. They still are. We're watching in the living room. President's got a little table just like this with one of the old-timey phones. And as soon as President 43 said his remarks, within a minute, that phone rang. Yes, son. Imagine having a chance to see this. He goes, you did a really good job. Hold on, your mom wants to say something. George, I thought you did really well. You made us proud. And he said, hold on, Nantz is here. He said, Mr. President, that was awesome. I mean, I'm on the phone with him within 3-4 minutes of him addressing the nation. And he said, what do you guys do today? And I told him, we played golf and everything. How did 41 do? I said, he played great. Did he win? I said, yes, sir, he won. That makes me very happy. He said, I'm on the boat going right back down to the harbor. Mm-hmm. Had to boat him over to the island. And I handed it back to his dad. They told each other they loved each other, and that closed out the 1 year anniversary of 9/11.
Wow. So it's hard to believe. That's incredible. 23 years have gone by.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to ask you where you were on the original 9/11, and how did that impact the sports world? How do you remember that impacting the journalism world? You were in Connecticut.
I was 45 miles away from the World Trade Centers. At that time, I was the host of the NFL Today. So I'd been in the city on September the 9th, because 9/11 happened on a Tuesday. And that night, interestingly, after I finished the show, I went out to dinner with some of our crew members. I was doing the show with Ditka and Deion Sanders. And we went down to the area right there in the shadows of the World Trade Center to have dinner. And, of course, you wake up on Tuesday, beautiful day. My oldest daughter was in the second grade, dropped her off at school. Little beach community called Westport. I went for a run, came back. I'm scrambling some eggs. I got the Today Show on. First plane hits. And I'm not going to name the anchors at the time, but they made some pretty big gaffes at the time. They thought it was just some small plane and a pilot who just kind of got lost and steered up a small single-engine prop plane and propeller plane into a building. And then while they were going through all this, and I'm watching all this, the impact of what you're seeing, it had to be more than that. And all of a sudden you see the second building struck. And look, we had 4 people in our community, including some dads of children in my daughter's school that perished. And I knew other people, I'm just talking about in our community. And of course, they called off school and we had to go pick up our kids and made the decision not to tell Caroline what had happened. And she didn't know for several months until she one day just asked me, Daddy, did somebody fly a plane into a building in New York recently? That was a tough one to try to like comfort a child. So I was scheduled to do that weekend the studio show again in New York, where the broadcast center is. The NFL called off the action week 2. It really got called off because Vinny Testaverde was the quarterback for the New York Jets. Our main game, our doubleheader game, was going to be the Jets at the Raiders in Oakland. And he said, I'm not getting on a plane. And when the commissioner heard that at the time, Paul Tagliabue, he said, we're not playing the games. It was the right decision to call off the games. Meantime, I'm sitting at the dinner table. We all remember our world was upside down. It's just nothing felt right. When I got a phone call again from CBS News saying, Dan, there's basically around the news network coverage without commercial breaks. They would like you to come in tonight. This is now on Wednesday night, and talk about the effect of 9/11 on the sports community. I cringed at first because it felt so a little insensitive, and I just thought I didn't think I could be put in a proper light if I went in and tried to talk. Well, they're going to cancel this game, and obviously it'd be hopefully a little bit more lyrical and poetic than that. But I kind of had no choice in this one. And within 30 minutes, there was a car service at my door, and shuttling me into New York. And I went into the CBS Broadcast Center, and Dan was here. You were there. Wait, Dan was here. I was where you are. And Ed Bradley was on the other side of me. You might remember Ed. He used to be on 60 Minutes. Great guy. And I had a few times being on the desk with Dan Rather. One was when Payne Stewart's tragic accident happened, and that was the lead story, and he brought me in for that. But when Dan Rather talks on the desk, he drops his voice down so low, I kind of want to go, I'm sorry, can you tell me that one more time? You know, I'm really straining to hear him. He's so soft-spoken. Of course, the microphone amplifies everything. And I tried to wax a little bit about sports and the reality check that it's so immaterial at a time like this. I'm glad I did it in the long run. But, you know, New York, it was bizarre seeing New York with officers on every street corner and the streets empty. And, yeah, it was just such a time.
Yeah, it is hard to believe that 23 years have gone by. I got to be there about 3 weeks after 9/11. I was with my dad, and we went to look at divinity schools and got to stand at ground zero. And it wasn't until being there and taking it all in, it was still smoldering, still had rubble everywhere, and you can't really put that into words. And the number of lives that were lost, the way the world changed, and the way the country came together was also inspiring.
It was. You think of what we've lived through. We're all somewhat in the same age group here, give or take. But, you know, our lives, we saw that. It's unimaginable. We lived through a pandemic. I mean, some of these things that have happened, you never know when they're going to surface like that. And, that one was a big one. It was just, for me, just living in the New York area and knowing people at my golf club I belonged to, the Stanwich Club in Wingfoot, that lost lives there. And, you know, we'll never forget it. It did change us. But the best thing that came out of it, if you can say it that way, is the fact that we can get a look at what it really feels like to be respectful and not polarized. We're all together as one.
Right.
You know, we're so far away from that right now. Just hope it doesn't take a tragic event to unite us all like that.
As I say, politics has come a long way from George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, hanging out at Walker's Point.
Well,
one of the reasons we do these series is because we believe in dialogue. We believe in civility.
Yes.
But what do you think it will take for people to be more civil, to disagree better, to treat each other more humanely? What do you think it will take?
Well, I think one thing that has made it harder to dial back the clock is social media. Right. Because for some reason people feel a demand to have an opinion on everything, and they get so emboldened on a position. And there's also, of course, the factor that you can post something and hide behind it and all this and that. But it's created this disrespectful way of communicating with people. Now, having said that, I have no Twitter account. I don't have a Facebook account. I don't TikTok. I don't have Instagram. Now, do I get people sending me links to stories? Yeah, I mean, I know I'm involved on my coverage, and way more than I want to be. When Tony and I do a game, like this Sunday, Cincinnati at Kansas City, 3:25. Check your local listings. You can go, if you are so inclined, you can go to Twitter. And again, I don't know, this is what I'm told. You can go to Twitter, and I can guarantee you Tony will be one of the top 3 most tweeted about persons on the planet while we're on the air. And I'll get dragged into that too. If I say something really stupid, I'll be up there also in the top 3. But I'll be somewhere around 10th most tweeted, because sometimes it's Nantz and Romo. So you get dragged in how you get, what do they call it when you're getting?
Tagged,
yeah. So that wasn't the word I was thinking about, but whenever they talk about the rankings of most talked about, trending.
There you go.
So that comes with the territory. So that's hard. I can't predict what it's going to be to change the world. I wish there was a shining star that could come in and we could all feel like we could rally behind them, that person, man or woman, and people wouldn't just be so darn ugly about it. I want to say this too. When 41 passed, November 30th, 2018, I was in Atlanta. He died on a Friday night. I talked to him earlier that week. We knew it was getting pretty grim. I didn't know he was going to pass. I didn't. And I can still remember sitting in my hotel room when I got the call. The next day, I don't even feel like being on the air Sunday calling a Falcons game. The next day, I'm in meetings with the Baltimore Ravens and head coach John Harbaugh. I kept feeling my phone vibrating. Who is this? It's really annoying. So I picked up my phone, and there it was encoded, 42, President Clinton. So I looked at Coach Harbaugh. Romo was across from me. And I said, Coach, I hate to do this, but I said, it's been a tough day for me. And I said, would you mind if I excuse myself? You go right ahead. I went back in one of the training rooms at the Ravens Hotel, and I called 42 back. And we talked for well over a half an hour. Now, we talked many times since. But he knew what I knew. He had seen a man who had the biggest heart in the world, who really wanted, and again, I'm not trying to be political. A lot of people would say vitriolic things about him. All I can tell you is I saw the purity of it up front. He just knew the greatness of the man who had served this country in so many capacities, from a Navy aviator who was shot down over the Pacific 80 years ago last week, September the 2nd, and saved miraculously as he was floating toward an island called Chichijima, Japan territory, where cannibalism was kind of normal. He got saved by a submarine that came out of the ocean, saw the periscope, they saw something, came to see what it was. There on the top of the ocean floor was a future president of the United States that they dragged to safety. That was 80 years ago, September 2nd. Served as, in all these capacities, secretary to the UN, ambassador to China, congressman, vice president, on and on. CIA, head of the CIA. And yet he treated everybody with so much respect. So 42 was crying. We were sharing a really great crisis. There's no one else I can talk to about this. And again, I thought, how great is this? These two, we saw a debate last night. Here were two people sparring. I'd have to go back and look at it. I'm sure they were sparring in their own way in the 92 version of what that looked like. I guarantee it wasn't as ugly as it can be today. But they were sparring. They both wanted to serve this country. President Clinton won. But the postscript on this is he loved George Bush. George Bush loved him. That's the greatness of this country. And at his service in Washington at the National Cathedral, 43 delivered the eulogy for his father, and he introduced his 3 brothers and his sister Doro, and then he added, I have 2 more brothers from another mother who are here, and he introduced President Clinton, and he mentioned me as well, introduced me.
Wow.
So, pretty powerful.
Very special.
Can I just give you some mannerisms that are kind of lost? I see it sometimes in people today. 43 was governor of Texas, and they're kind of dabbling to see if there's interest in him on a national level. So they did some sort of cocktail fundraising thing in Manhattan at a place called the River Club. And he and his dad were flying up to New York, and they asked me to join them at this little gathering, this reception. Can you be there, Jimmy? Can you get there about 5 o'clock? We're going to go to Morton's afterwards. I said, yes, sir. I said, we'll be there. So again, no one knew 43 was not on the radar as a future president. It's kind of just sampling and testing. We walk in, wait for the arrival, greet them. We're walking into this restaurant. There's the first person in the restaurant is in a wheelchair. And it's this famous jazz musician named Lionel Hampton. You guys remember him? 41 saw him. Hampton was a big friend of the president's. The president walked right up, and he got down on one knee like this. And he talked to him and shook his hand, and they were talking at eye level. I just was struck. What an amazing snapshot of respect for someone to get on their eye level. Anyway, party went on. Yeah. They shook a lot of hands. I stood at the back of the room, watched, jumped in the SUV with them, and went to Morton's. I told President 41 that night, I said, that was an amazing thing I saw you do. I said, can you tell me about that? He said, Jimmy, you never make anyone be forced to look up at you. No one's better than anyone else. He said, that is a great friend of mine, even if he wasn't a friend of mine. When you see somebody that for whatever reasons, disabled, and they're going to be stuck in a position to talk to you like this, that's not fair to anybody. Wow. Always try to get to someone's eye level when you talk to them.
It's powerful.
You walk into a restaurant with 41. He would make sure everyone sat down first and sat where they wanted to sit, to be seated. He would take what's left over. He wanted to make sure everyone in the room was comfortable. That made him happy. It made him happy that everybody else was comfortable. He'll settle for whatever's left over. Most people, just human nature. You walk into a restaurant, round table, first person runs to the back of the table like they're doing you a favor because they want to look over the internal part of that is they really want to look over the entire span of the restaurant. Right. That is the seat. Right. That's the president's seat, so to speak.
But he didn't do that.
You know where he would always sit? He'd always sit in a seat opposite that, facing the wall, because that's what was left over. You jump into an SUV, it might be 2 or 3 of us. Always going to be 2 agents in the front. Here's an 80-year-old man pulling that seat back to get into the 3rd row. Mr. President, you would actually train yourself to run to the car to make sure you hopped in the 3rd row because otherwise he would take it. He would beat you to it because he wanted you to be comfortable. Wow. When I go around on the road and I'm with friends or colleagues, a car comes up, people want to ride shotgun next to the driver. And then everybody else can fend for themselves. I'm a 3rd row kind of a guy. 41 was happy back there. That's the way he treated people.
Yep, that's great. So when people think of you, I think they're amazed that you're able to do all that you do. You've called Super Bowls, you've called the Masters. This was your 39th Masters. You called the Final Four up until the last one in 23. That was in Houston.
Yeah.
Can you give us a glimpse into the life of Jim Nantz? What's the hardest part about what you do, and what do you love about what you do? Because you do a lot, and you have a lot of gifts.
First of all, I love what I do. And I do get asked to try to help in a lot of situations, if it's whatever. Friends have things that are important to them. I try my best. charitable things, charity events, things like that. I had one yesterday for a friend of mine, Thomas Rhett, had a great charity event, amazing guy. Makes me happy if you can do something that makes other people happy. Postscript to my dad, you had that video, is that I wrote that book and I realized there was truly an audience out there for that story about how a family rallied behind the patriarch of the family and how they did everything they could to protect his dignity. And the caregiving side of it, they're unsung heroes. It doesn't have to be Alzheimer's. The caregivers of this world don't get the credit. Their lives are turned upside down. I watched my mother and my sister do all of this to keep my dad afloat while I'm traveling around, still living and chasing my childhood dream. So after a couple of years after the book came out, I realized I need to do something more of my life than just be attending the greatest championships of American sports. So wrote a check and made a commitment to raise a lot of money, commit more money, and try to build the greatest Alzheimer's research center in the world, and name it after my dad. And that's been a lot of time on that. A lot of people don't know about it, but the Nantz National Alzheimer's Center at Houston Methodist Hospital is an amazing place with people that are at the top of their game. And I'm here to tell you that fantastic things have happened in that world in the last 2 years. Some breakthroughs. We're not there yet, but there was never hope. And I was always trying to sell hope. I wanted to see our team defeat the opponent that defeated my dad. I wanted, before I took my last breath, to know that we won. We were part of something bigger globally that flipped the script and found hope for all of us. And I'm not selling false hope, but I'm telling you, with drugs like lecanemab and donanemab, and more to come, and brain scanning and things that now you could even, it hasn't gotten the attention yet, still going through some trial phasing. We do a lot of trials. We are cutting edge on that. And I'm very excited about that. That's a big part of my life. But on a day-to-day basis, well, I had a podcast today with the Cincinnati Bengals television show. I did another podcast with an LA-based show for 45 minutes. I took my son to football practice at Palmer Park. I picked up my daughter from dance at Innsworth High School. She goes to the lower school, but they bust them over there. And I'm going to be sitting down and having dinner with them here in about 15 minutes. And we'll get them all cleaned up, bathed, put them to bed, say their prayers, tell a nighttime story. It'll be a great day, and especially because I got to be here with all of you guys.
What do you want your legacy to be? When people talk about Jim Nantz, you've shared so many good things tonight. There's so many things you've accomplished, so many things you've given to. What do you want your legacy to be when one day, and you've got many more years to go, this guy's going to call 50 masters. He's got at least 11 more, okay? Yeah. What do you want your legacy to be?
This is one of those sound bites that when that day does come, they're going to pull this sound bite right here. I was someone who was always grateful for the blessings that have come to me in my life, starting with having great parents and then being a parent, the joy of being a parent, to live a childhood dream, to be able to have beautiful, beautiful kids, to be a part of a community. Gratitude is big for me. I never want anybody to think, oh, he takes this for granted. He lives a charmed life. Because there is a lot of parts to it that are pretty darn fun. It's a lot of work. You're balancing a lot of things. But the Alzheimer's component, defeating Alzheimer's, that's really big for me. That's a really big, massive goal. Family goals, the welfare of my children comes first. And being always at my core, true to my faith, true to my gratitude. I have a saying that I use. People say, what would you like to do? It's a little different phrasing than you had, Clay. What sporting event have you not done that you would like to one day call? No, I'm not angling for anything. I long for nothing, but I'm grateful for everything. That's my mantra. I long for nothing. There's nothing I want or ask for. Just good health, happiness, safety for my family, my loved ones, for my country. And can I just say, before you toss me off this stage, speaking of gratitude, how grateful I am that I not only have a church home here. I try to come here. I'm not here. My next Sunday is going to be the last Sunday of February, the next Sunday here.
You might not be alone in that, by the way.
I'm booked until then, but I'll be watching. How much, though, I appreciate this church, this community, and this man right here. He has been, life throws you some curveballs from time to time. That's life, right? I mean, we all have these adversities and things that happen that you can't expect, whatever they might be. And I have a friend here in Clay Stauffer that will be a friend all the way until that epitaph you're trying to get me to lay out before everyone right now. You will be always a vitally important and blessed part of my life. And I'm grateful. You have made my move here to this community. You've made it for me. You've been, people talk about the glue. You've been the stabilizing force by having you in my life. So I just want to be able to say thank you.
You're very kind. I appreciate you saying that. I'm gonna say a prayer with and for Jim, and then he does have a commitment with his kids that I'm gonna let him go to, and I'm gonna just make a few announcements before you. But let me say a prayer and right back at you. You've been a great friend, and I think all of Nashville is thankful that you ended up here. You're such a blessing to this community, to this church, to the sports world, everything you do, and so we're grateful for you, and thank you for the time tonight. So let me say a prayer. Loving God, grateful for Jim, for everything that he shared tonight, for all of his experiences, and for the way that he graces our living rooms, our television screens, and multiple sports, and also tonight, the way that he was here at the church to share from the heart. Thank you for his friendship, and thank you for the many contributions that he's made in his career to this community and to our nation. Be with him as he travels and does what he does. May he know that he's loved and supported, and may we take the things that he shared tonight to heart. All this we pray in Christ's name. Amen. Let's thank Jim Nantz one more time.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you.
Really quick, as Jim leaves, 4 more weeks. The schedule's on your chair. Love for you to come back. I hope all of you will come back. But thanks for being here, and have a great night. Thank you, Jim.